Welcome to First. I'm Nichelle Poston along with Mark Eichman and Shirley Min. Bullying is still an issue state leaders are trying to solve. We'll review their efforts and talk to a mother who worries about what has happened to her child.
Education was one of the final pieces put in place in the last legislative session. Was enough done to continue the Wilmington Education Initiative? And what's the next step?
And finances are complicated enough these days, so why not get behind a group that will stand by you in making those decisions? First, your public media news magazine starts now.
There's a new law that's supposed to bring a common sense approach to handling bullying in the state, especially in schools. The way Senate Bill 207 was written, it improves the state's response to bullying incidents and help parents to better deal with bullying opposed to getting the Attorney General or police involved. In this week's First Look, we'll learn a little more about the bill, plus introduce you to a local mother who never thought her 13-year-old daughter would come face to face with bullies.
I remember when all of a sudden sex education was in school. Where's the bullying education?
Bullying hits too close to home for Tamiko Bay. Bay says her 13-year-old daughter received 7 stitches above her right eye last month after a bullying incident turned violent. And it all started with a disagreement online.
I have access to her social network accounts, and one day I was seeing these back and forth messages. She was at home, but she left her chat open.
The mother of 2 tells First her daughter, Miera, will talk about everything including politics online, until some teens from their Hocassin neighborhood started teasing Miera about her views.
I think it's a major life lesson for Miera as well about keeping your private, business private so that these discussions don't come up. But again, I think that children are an extension of their parents.
Bay is also a victim of bullying who thought her children would never experience it because they're homeschooled.
I just don't think that the schools, law enforcement, and parents are taking bullying as serious as it is. This is 3rd generation in my family. My parents had to remove me out of the public school system in Dover and force me to go to Ursuline Academy because of bullying. I had to take my daughter out of AI high school because nobody did anything when my daughter was getting kicked in the stomach, and I homeschooled her from that. And I said, Mia's never gonna go through this. Not.
Downstate in Dover and inside Legislative Hall, lawmakers continue to take the issue seriously, and in fact just made it easier for schools and parents to handle bullying with Senate Bill 207.
You've heard about some horrific cases where kids have committed suicide because they were bullied. And so our goal is to really work at the school level to try to stop it.
The subject, however, is nothing new to Senator Henry.
Well, first of all, bullying has been something I've been interested in for many, many years. In my previous employment, I worked for Delaware Technical and Community College, and I found that a lot of college students were experiencing bullying. So it's not just an elementary school or high school phenomenon. There's even workplace bullying.
But with Henry's focus primarily on bullying among young people, especially those in school, she sums up Senate Bill 207 and what it does.
It's a better handbook. It's a more balanced approach to dealing with bullying.
Henry says there's actually 2 parts to the bill.
The other thing, though, is it creates something called an ombudsman, and that's kind of a unique position, and it's an advocate for people who are bullied and their parents. So it tells them their rights. It makes sure that the rights of the parents and the children are protected, and it also helps the school to make sure that they're doing the right thing, too, because there's someone else looking at things.
According to Henry, every year there are reports given to the Board of Education about the number of bullying incidents. Those numbers will also be turned over to legislators to help lawmakers decide if the state is getting better at addressing bullying and if more laws are necessary. But not everyone is convinced, such as Bay, because she believes it's a problem that starts and ends at home.
So it doesn't matter if your children are homeschooled or not, they're going to have to face society eventually. If parents are not doing their job, then this is what's going to happen.
Senate Bill 207 passed both the House and Senate. It's expected to be signed by Governor Jack Markell this summer. Attorney General Matt Dinn also supports the bill.
So, Nichelle, how does this anti-bullying bill differ from other measures addressing bullying that we've seen in the past?
Well, Mark, right now, schools are required to report to police any student fight incident, whether it's a misdemeanor or something more serious. Senate Bill 207 also will give parents and schools more flexibility and the choice to report less serious fights to the police, of course.
And how many of those less serious fights are reported to police?
Well, according to the Attorney General, most are misdemeanors, but that number last year was well over 100.
All right, thanks a lot, Nichelle. And we'll continue to follow this story on newsworks.org/Delaware.
Around 5 a.m. on July 1st, the 148th meeting of Delaware's General Assembly finally came to a close. Lawmakers won't meet again until next year, but they've left plenty to discuss as they head out of town. Here to help us break it all down is reporter Avi Wolfman-Arent. Hey, Avi.
Hey, Shirley. Nice to see you.
So first I want to talk about the whole redistricting in Wilmington. Before we get to what happened on the last day of the legislative session, why don't you remind us, give us a little context here about the redistricting?
Right. So the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission, and everyone calls it WIC, by the way, was formed by the General Assembly last year, and it was basically tasked with coming up with this redistricting plan. They said, let's take the 4 school districts in Wilmington and consolidate them into 3 school districts. And the idea was to reduce the amount of sort of bureaucratic disarray. Wilmington has always had a really messy educational landscape.
Mm-hmm. And so you have, even though geographically they're all within city limits, you have the districts from sort of all over the place, each having a little
and
piece
it's
of
all
the pie.
they're all and there's a lot of sort of cooks in the kitchen, basically.
Right. So they presented a plan. What did lawmakers think?
Well, basically, lawmakers were worried about how much it was going to cost, and particularly they were concerned about what would happen to the Red Clay School District, which was slated to take on a lot of new students from low-income areas of Wilmington as part of this plan. We talked with one of the representatives who represents Red Clay residents, Deborah Hudson, a Republican. This is what she had to say.
I just don't like to pass a bill where there's no money to follow it, and I know that there was the potential for referendums to follow, even if there was some money put with the bill, and the citizens in Red Clay are really, really fed up with referendums, and I just couldn't support it at this time.
So Republicans really lined up against this proposal, and some Democrats were really wary about it too, particularly those who represent Red Clay constituents.
Right. And do you think it's just about the money?
Yeah. I mean, like that's what they'll say. I mean, I think there are probably other things going on, but money has been the main talking point.
Okay. So was the proposal killed, or what's the term? I guess.
I use iced.
Yeah.
They punted on it. I mean, they kind of delayed, so it gets a
Yeah.
little tricky. The legislature passed a law saying that we're going to allocate $200,000 to study this issue a little bit more and look at the fiscal impact of redistricting. What that means basically is they're going to come back again next year, do this all again, and we'll see if we get any action on it. But right now, there's no redistricting moving forward, and the earliest we could have any redistricting at this point would be 2019.
Okay. So do you think that's a good thing, though, or is it just more talking? I mean, because it sounds like that might be worthwhile information to know what the fiscal impact would be.
I think the proponents of the plan would say we did a lot of this already. I mean, there was hundreds and hundreds of pages of reports about this. They had all these assurances that they wouldn't move forward with a plan if it cost too much money or local taxpayers would be burdened in any way. So I think a lot of proponents see it as a cop-out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move on from WIC. What else happened on that last day?
Well, one thing that didn't happen was there wasn't a big argument about the budget. That got done early this year, so there wasn't all this fighting and hair pulling. And we actually talked about this with one of the representatives, Deborah Heffernan, who's also from up here in Newcastle County.
I really think this was a very successful session, even though we had a budget crunch, a lot of issues to take care of, but a lot of bills passed that are really helping people in Delaware. I'm so happy.
And there were a lot of bills passed, mind you. By my count, on July 1st alone, there were 49 bills passed by the House of Representatives, 35 by the Senate. So there was a lot of activity on the last day.
Right. Any standouts of those bills?
It depends what you consider standout. There was we have a task force now to discover to investigate noise control. So there, okay. But generally, you know, there was really not that much. There was one interesting bill that could eventually lead to the way change the way teachers are evaluated in Delaware.
Mm-hmm. That's a big issue.
That's a big issue, but the bill is really just a pilot program. So, you know, they got a lot of little things done, but it wasn't sort of any big blockbusters in the last day.
Okay, and so that was sort of reflective of the session as a whole, maybe?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The way I read it, I mean, you look at the big ticket items, redistricting, that was basically delayed. The death penalty repeal, that didn't go anywhere. There was this proposal about raising the minimum wage, that never made it out of House committee. So, I mean, it was sort of like a lot of big issues on the table, but not a lot of big issues really tackled. And I think that's somewhat reflective of the fact that, the governor's in his last year. So I think there'll be new blood coming in next year and probably a little bit more activity.
Yeah, things will be reinvigorated.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much, Avi. And as always, you can read more of Avi's coverage and all of Delaware coverage at newsworks.org/Delaware.
Coming up on First, understanding finances can be hard enough. Meet the Delaware group who will stand by you to help. And it's the perfect mix of music, art, and philosophy that helps fuel this week's First experience. Check it out later on First.
As we continue to digest the action at the end of this year's General Assembly, our first person this week is Senator Karen Peterson. Senator Peterson, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Joe.
You surprised a lot of people last month when you announced you were not going to seek re-election and you were going to retire. What brought you to that decision?
Well, a couple of years ago when Senator Bunting announced his retirement, I never forgot what he said. He said, "You just know when it's time." And I remember thinking, I hope I know when it's time. And sure enough, I did. This past year, it became real apparent to me that after 4 terms, 14 years, that it was really time for me to slow down, just to do some things that I enjoy. Not that I didn't enjoy 14 years of constituent work and such, but it's time to do some different things. Like most people, I've worked my whole life and looked forward to a day that I can retire, and that day has come.
Was it a difficult decision or emotional, or just you knew it was time and that was it?
I knew it was time, but I kept going back and forth because as I talked to people about the possibility of retiring, they'd say, no, you can't. You have so much more to do. You have to get death penalty repealed and you have to do this. And I kept thinking, well, no matter how many terms I do, there'll still be things left at the end that need to be done. So other people can do it.
Right. You've been in the Senate for 14 years, as you mentioned. Do you remember what got you into it in the first place?
I do indeed. Well, I had held public office back in the 1980s as president of Newcastle County Council for 8 years. And then I gave that up and just continued finishing my career at the Department of Labor, where I retired in 2001. And when I retired from the department, I took a job in the private sector, a very nice job, but I felt I just missed public policy issues. I really missed helping people with their problems. And it was a real stark reality to me that I needed to get back into that. So I decided to run for the Senate in my district, and it just so happened that the senator at the time announced his retirement. Just around the time I was getting ready to announce my candidacy.
In the 14 years, what really stands out as a moment?
There were a couple of moments, the first of which was not related to the legislature at all. And it involved a community in my district called Glenville that was destroyed in a flood in my first year in office. 168 homes were destroyed. And that became my life for about 2 years, and I mean on a daily basis. Getting those people out of there. It was no longer safe for people to live there. They'd been flooded twice in 4 years. It was time to get them out. And that ended up being the largest buyout in United States history by local governments. There was no federal money involved in that. And we got 168 people out of there, paid fair market value for their houses, paid for relocation, and they're all safe now. So that was like the first big thing that came along in my legislative career. And then I think my open government legislation, opening the General Assembly to the public, it hadn't been open in 300 years, so that was pretty amazing. It took me 7 years to get that done, and it took the help of Speaker of the House Bob Gilligan, who teamed up with me in year 7 and said, we're going to get this done this year. So opening the General Assembly to the public. And then the next big one for me was the Child Victims Act. And that one to me was just really personal, having gotten to know many of the victims of child sex abuse who were barred by a 2-year statute of limitations, who couldn't get justice, and we were able to reopen that statute of limitations and allow them to file lawsuits against the people who abused them.
What about the moment on the stairs when the governor signing the legislation for marriage equality? I think that was
That was amazing.
What was that like?
It all happened so fast. I mean, I never imagined in my lifetime that I'd be able to get married. You know, I got married at 63. You know, most people don't wait until they're 63 to get married, but it wasn't an option. And so things happened though very quickly. It was like bam, bam, bam.
During your tenure, during the Minner administration, you know, I think you fought very hard to add protections against sexual discrimination for people, and it just never happened, session after session after session. Do you feel like you sort of laid a foundation, and that's sort of what helped pass some of these other bills and laws that helped the LGBT community, you know, like you mentioned, one year, you know, and subsequently? Do you think that helped?
Well, I think the person who laid the foundation was Representative Bill Oberle, who for 11 years was a voice crying in the wilderness. You know, he was the one who was introducing these bills long before I was elected to the legislature. And he was the one who pushed. He's also the one who took all the heat for it, you know, the hate mail and the death threats and all that. So Bill Oberle was really the pioneer in that respect.
Death penalty going to get done in the near future?
I think the Supreme Court is going to do it for us.
Okay. And what's next for you?
What's next? Well, we're going to Disney World.
Yay!
I booked that months ago.
Well, have a great time.
Thank you. Thank you.
State Senator Karen Peterson, we always appreciate your time.
My
and
pleasure.
We wish you well. We will probably call on you a few more times for your opinions on the issues. And you can watch all of this interview at newsworks.org/Delaware.
Stand By Me, a financial organization created by Governor Jack Markell, recently celebrated its 5th year of helping Delaware residents with their finances. 76% of Americans reportedly live paycheck to paycheck, and this financial epidemic is growing by leaps and bounds. In Delaware, work is underway to fix it. Over the last 5 years, 10,000 people have received coaching from Stand By Me counselors. 70% of them work full and part-time jobs, but still face financial difficulties.
There's a large segment of the population that continues to struggle to make ends meet, and they're doing everything right. They're employed, they've gone to school, they have an education, they send their kids to school. They have all the same dreams and hopes that we all do for the American dream.
Mary DuPont is the director of Stand By Me, a nonprofit agency that equips Delawareans with the tools to work through their financial issues.
It's kind of like financial therapy. So we find out what's on your mind, what are your challenges, what are your goals, what would you like to accomplish? And then we work with people one-on-one using a personal financial coach.
Mobile financial coach Shay Frisbee says there is no one issue that brings customers in for help.
I have over 200 customers, and to have that many people come with a variety of obstacles and issues that are affecting them in their financial life and their financial wellness, it's not one thing. It could be a multitude of things.
For Linda Hunter Moss, a child care provider for Head Start at the West End Center, the issue was debt reduction so she could buy a home.
Well, I started going through my report on my own, but then I said, okay, I want to get more tips on how I can be more financially aware.
Many people start the process of tackling their financial issues, but shame, frustration, and lack of knowledge causes them to give up.
Like, oh my gosh, I feel embarrassed. I got this, and not being fear, the confidence knowing that you can do it. You're not the only person who may have a setback financially.
Linda says the coaching gave her additional help to reach her goals.
Then when I started Stand By Me, I met my counselor, and she gave me more tips on how to pay things off, how to contact the creditors, to pay it in full or make an offer to pay it off, and how to dispute anything that was on my credit was negatively affecting me.
Financial setbacks can occur with a loss of a job, an unexpected illness, or escalating debt. But it's not just cash flow that's crippling finances.
What we're hearing from our customers is that the large majority of them are struggling with a new phenomena that, when I was a kid, never existed. And that is the credit report and the credit score, the almighty, because that is your report card for life.
That 3-digit number, which ranges from 300 to 850, can be a deciding factor in getting an apartment, purchasing utilities, or getting car insurance. therefore forcing people to turn to alternative services.
You have to go to predatory financial services and pay exorbitant prices on car loans, on things that we all take for granted. Forget about mortgages, but just basic consumer credit. So you end up paying more, having access to less.
The counselors teach credit and debt management as essential to establishing a firm financial foundation. And in Linda's case, it was key to obtaining one of her goals.
A home is your asset, it's equity for you. And that's what I'm building right now for myself, is equity. Equity in myself. So I can start doing what I want to do in my life. I want to travel, I want to do things, and having a home is the first thing on my list.
Stand By Me is not federally funded. It receives charitable contributions. It also partners with the United Way and various community organizations. And Linda is now a homeowner. But she's not the only success story. Stand By Me's 5th anniversary celebration gave clients, partners, and community groups a chance to see how the organization is helping other Delaware residents.
Time for a midsummer break with the best of Delaware. It's always one of our favorites here on First. Mark Nardone is editor of Delaware Today magazine. He has the pleasure of providing the details. So let's dive into this list, and let's start with a good burger. Kid Shalene's Charcoal House in Wilmington. What makes them great?
Start flame broiling, big patties, juicy, delicious.
Okay. The editors also picked a great steak, and that would be Michelle's in Dover.
Yeah, classic steakhouse. If you've never been to Dover Downs, the hotel, great restaurant.
Okay. Is there anything in particular that, I guess, the filet mignon, like, does it matter what kind of steak you get?
I don't think it matters. It's all good. The filet, the strips.
All right.
I think occasionally they have steak Diane. That's always a treat.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. And since Michelle's obviously in Dover, let's talk about the Best of Delaware event. It's back in Dover, the Dover Downs. I guess why the change in venue?
We'd like to mix it up. We do it upstate some years, downstate some. This is the magazine of the state and is the Best of Delaware. Okay. So we like Dover. A lot of fun there.
Well, that's good. When is the event again?
It is July 21st.
Okay, that's good for our readers to mark on their calendar, of course. And back to the list, Rusty Rudder got a Best Live Music Downstate. That's always a good beach bet.
Oh yeah, Thursday nights at the Rudder are a classic.
Okay.
You can't say you've lived until you've gone at least once.
So how often do you go?
Oh my gosh, as much as I can, which is about once a summer these days.
Okay, well that's something I'll actually have to put on my list.
In a previous life.
Okay, well I'll put that on my list. And speaking of live events, Best Talk Show went to Susan Monday.
Yes.
She's the downstate choice, and now she's heard statewide on WDEL radio.
First time there has been a statewide talk show host in Delaware.
That's good, good. And I'm also pleased that, Delaware Today readers picked me as the best.
They obviously have exceptional taste.
Yes, I would say that. No, I'm just kidding. And let's just talk more about the list. Akura Japanese cuisine in Hokkessin, reader's choice.
Totally authentic. The chef there he's trained in Japan, so you are getting the best Japanese cuisine you can find.
Okay. And real quick, Just Hooked in Fenwick.
Oh, get the crab cakes.
Crab cakes?
Delicious.
Yeah, you guys do a special every once in a while about, I guess, the best seafood here in Delaware.
Yeah, we know our crab cakes.
Okay.
Just Hooked is up there.
Okay, that's good to know. And what about pasta? Capers and
lemons, homemade.
And that's also an editor's pick.
Yeah. A lot of homemade noodles up there, a lot of nice preparations.
Okay, well, and then you pretty much said earlier it kind of fits vegan food. Like if you're a vegan, you can go there as well?
There's a nice range for everybody.
Okay, well, that's also good to know. Always fun to have Mark Nardone, editor of Delaware Today magazine here. Thank you. You'll find Mark Thursday, July 21st at Dover Downs. Check out our WHYY table as well.
Michael Krause describes himself as a three-legged stool with music, philosophy, and art fueling his creative work. First Experience visited Michael's Lewis, Delaware studio to get a look at his work and see how those three parts of his life come together as one.
I grew up in Cleveland, started playing violin when I was 7, and I was destined to become a musician. After I worked with Joe Gingold, the concertmaster of the Cleveland Orchestra, I went to university and discovered philosophy. When I was 28 years old, I had an epiphany. I was visiting the studio of a friend of mine in New York, and she started hauling out these huge shaped canvases. And I had the sense, as I was experiencing this moment, that I was in the space rather than looking at the space. I had to start painting at age 28. At the end of that first year, I had my first one-person show, and I've been ever since juggling these three muses: my music, my art, and my philosophy. After 15 years of experimenting, that I discovered powder pigment. They are the pigments that precede mixing of a medium. It may be oil or it may be acrylic medium, and that allows me to actually work with brushes to work the pigment into the surface. My interest is to get at depicting the relations between levels, so as to actually get a sense of the layering of space upon space upon space, that sense of beyondness that's been a preoccupation of mine for a long time. And then simultaneously I'd been working with these ciphers. These were a kind of automatic writing that arises out of my conductorial gestures. You know, I've been conducting ever since I was a teenager. So I'm very concerned with the motion that is the musical motion behind some of these images. Some people have seen Arabic, other people have seen Hebrew, other people have seen musical scores. I love it when people tell me what they see, because many times they teach me what I've done. And I think that's as it should be. I don't believe that there is one meaning to a given work of art. It takes on its own life, and that's the beauty for me of actually doing art. I can't not do it. I don't think I could recognize myself to be the person I take myself to be if I wouldn't or couldn't continue to do art. When I am doing my ciphers, it's going at a certain pace where I will be calm with myself. I am fascinated by the layering of that liquid on that two-dimensional surface. It's a kind of meditative moment. That's when I am most satisfied.
You can get more information on Michael and his work when you visit him on the web at krauseart.com. And next week, we'll introduce you to Michael's wife, Connie Costigan, a renowned Delaware artist. We visit her studio and talk with her about her work.
Next week on First, as the presidential campaigns kick into high gear this month, we'll meet some first-time Latino voters in Delaware. And the completion of the Mike Castle Trail offers a highlight into a piece of African-American history.
That is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Mark Eichman and Shirley Min, I'm Nichelle Poston. Have a great week.